from MIT, is a world-renowned system scientist, inventor, and entrepreneur, and he is now running for president. And you can find out more information about his platform. You can sign up to volunteer or make a donation at Shiva for President. That's the number 4.com. Dr. Shiva, thanks so much for being here.
Good. How are you doing, Misty?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. I'll be honest with you. I don't usually talk to politicians or candidates, with very few exceptions. I personally think electoral politics is a massive waste of time. And so when your people reach out to me, I was a little hesitant. Then I started doing some research, watching your interviews, learning more about you. And I learned that you actually think the same, that you are not a big fan of electoral politics either. So why are you running for president?
So, Misty, every 2 to 4 years, the establishment, basically confuses masses of people that citizenship is about essentially waking up for 30 minutes and going and voting, right? And this has been a recurrent process, and they basically and during the other period of time, they essentially confuse people with theatrics, right? A reality TV. And look, to your point, I've always been a ground activist because of my background. I've had to fight personally injustice all my life and on behalf of others. So I never voted ever. And that occurred in 1984 when I saw how both wings of the establishment also have the not so obvious establishment version. In the United States, a guy called Jesse Jackson tried to, quote unquote, acted like he was building a movement, but at the last minute, he corrals everyone and gives all of his votes to a Democrat, right? So both wings have these people who mouth the big game, but at the end of the day, they're really focused about not people building these bottoms-up movements. So it was only in 2016, that I decided, when a woman called Elizabeth Warren was running here, claiming she was a Native American Indian, it would be some politician claiming that they were an Aboriginal, right? And maybe they had one out of, So anyway, I decided here in Massachusetts, and the reason what had occurred to me was, today's interesting. Today's the anniversary of the invention of email. There's the actual copyright notice. In 1982. In 1978, I created the first email system as a 14-year-old kid. And the reason that story is important, that's connected to this, was the invention of email did not occur at MIT, which I went and did a bunch of degrees. It occurred before I came to MIT in a small medical college in one of the poorest cities in the United States called Newark, New Jersey, or cities in the United States. And so what's happened is that the larger narrative that's happened over the last 40, 50, 70 years is that those in power intimidate people into thinking that only they are the upper caste, right? And I grew up in a caste system in India where we were considered the lowest of the low. And part of that denigration of people is to think only a small set of people are smart, intelligent, and everyone else must follow them. So when these election cycles take place, Misty, it's a reflection of that sort of unholy process, right? They anoint people, they decide who's going to get visibility, and the whole thing is essentially rigged. Now, what I've been doing most of my life is I've been a ground activist. So I decided, you know what? If we run for politics, we're very open. We tell people that, hey, the reason I'm running is about building a movement and to giving you a real alternative. So I'll go on the ground, Misty, and I'll hand out these flyers. I'll show it to you. If you can see, this flyer says the lesser of two evils is killing our children. And I distributed a couple thousand at the train station, right? So you'll see that graph right there. If you can see, the red line is the US life expectancy. If you notice, it's going wackadoodle upside down. And so, for me, the opportunities as a guy who's been on the ground, got all the establishment degrees, succeeded in their world, but I never forgot where I came from. That graph, essentially, it's a key performance indicator, shows over the last 70 years, whether you're elected the left or the right, Democrat or Republican, they both have instituted policies. And it's not any one thing, right? It's not just a vaccine. It's not just a healthcare system. It's a whole range of policies. It's income inequality, which has put so much stress on the average individual that their children, by that graph, are going to be living a shorter lifespan than them. To me, that says everything about, right? Because they can't argue that. And I'm the only candidate bringing that up. And what's more fascinating is if you go look at my history, Misty, in 2020, I was the one who first called out Fauci. Robert Booby effing Kennedy, as I call him, was promoting lockdowns. Trump was promoting lockdowns, right? And what's happened is, and I was the one who discovered in my lawsuit, historic lawsuit, that the government has created a backdoor censorship portal into every social media company. Fucker Carlson, as I call him, never even wanted to bring that out. We gave him all the information, including Glenn Greenwald. All these dweebs that people hold up as though they're fighting for us didn't do anything because I'm independent, I'm beyond left and right, or they're just jealous. They don't want to give the limelight to someone who's exposing this independently. They waited 3 years with the Twitter files, and then they all started promoting Musk. I mean, Musk,
Yes.
where government ends and Elon Musk begins, nobody knows. So what we have right now is, if you saw the Republican debates, every one of those people is not only unqualified to be president, but they're all part of the swarm. None of them have gone through the life experience of I have, bottoms up. None of them even represent people, but they will literally steal my words, Misty. This is what they do in a recurrent process. I mean, I read a little bit about yourself. You're an activist. What's happened is the elites before used to just hammer people, right, with fascism. Over the last 100 years, they create these fake heroes, what I call the not so obvious establishment. These people literally steal the words of us true, anti-establishment people, mouth them. In fact, they have a whole PR department doing that right now. And the goal is to sucker people into thinking, oh, this person from above is going to save me. So people get distracted and they don't build a bottoms-up movement. So my run for president is important because we're telling people, look, even if an outsider ever wanted to win, you have to have a massive movement, right? Because you have to put the fear of God into those in power. And that occurred in the 1920s, with women leading many of these movements in the United States and globally for that matter. So if you look between the 1920s and 1950s, these movements, particularly in the United States, grew massively. And that's what ended, many of the infectious diseases, right? Because people were forced to give infrastructure. They eliminated child labor. And after the 50s in the United States, the elites decided, shit, we can never have this ever happening again. So they branded all those bottoms up movements as quote unquote communist, being capital C, communism being run out of Russia. And they branded activists as being, Russian agents. And that was done by the right wing, by a guy called McCarthy. And many people globally forget that it was 4 American workers were hanged in Haymarket Square in Chicago for fighting for the 8-hour workday, and 7 American workers were shot by the National Guard fighting for the 8-hour workday. In commemoration of those workers throughout the world named that May Day, International Workers' Day.
Yes.
It's celebrated everywhere else.
They've taken that away from us, Dr. Shiva. We're not allowed to celebrate that anymore, which is interesting to me. And I also think it's interesting that they have McCarthyism has made a roaring return. Not that I think it ever really went away, but now I myself have been called a Russian agent almost daily for the last, 6-7 years now. It's very interesting. We have to take a quick break and get some headlines. Hang tight. We're going to be right back with more here on TNT Radio.
TNT Radio News.
This is news.
Here we go.
This is James O'Neill with a check of today's headlines. Hurricane Idalia struck Florida's west coast, reaching the shore as a formidable Category 3 storm on Wednesday. The situation raises concerns about the potential for life-threatening storm surges and heavy rainfall. Addressing Transparency International Australia on August 30th, Assistant Treasury Minister Andrew Lee discussed the profound impact of corruption on the economy.
Just on share?
For all the latest community events, rallies, marches, festivals, and fundraisers happening near you, visit the What's on Events calendar on the TNT Radio website.
All right, everyone, this is Dr. Shiva. I'm doing a very nice interview with Misty out of...
All right, so we are back. We're here with Dr. Shiva. And just so everybody knows, if you are an activist, as you just heard there, TNT does offer the opportunity for you to promote your event on the website, tntradio.live. Please take advantage of that. It's free advertisement. It's free promotion for your event. What activist doesn't want that? I know I do. I love it. It's very helpful. So take advantage of that. If you have events coming up, it would be foolish to waste that. So, all right, we're here with Dr. Shiva. We're talking about why he's running for president. And in doing research about you, because to be fair and to be honest, I had not heard much about you prior to maybe a few months ago, 6 months ago-ish. And so in doing my research about you, one of the things that I do like about you is that you really don't hold back and you kind of do go after everybody fairly equally. You've gone after Bernie Sanders, who I despise immensely. You've gone after, as you call him, Booby Kennedy, which I love. I also despise him immensely. You also go after Vivek, the entire system, really, which I appreciate. And I love that you call them the not so obvious establishment, because I feel like what you just described there prior to the break is very accurate. I think that what they do is create an environment where these very safe types for them are able to kind of corral revolutionary energy into the system, as we've seen time and time again, Bernie Sanders being one of the most recent examples. How do you think that we can effectively combat that? Because it seems to be a very potent tactic that they're able to use against us.
Yeah, it's a great question, Misty. The number one way, look, ultimately, the leaders that we have, or the misleaders that we have, to be more accurate, reflect the consciousness of people, right? So fundamentally, what needs to happen is this dynamic that I'm talking about. In the times of in the 1920s, they called it the force of social democracy, right? Which was really the force in between revolutionaries and the obvious establishment. So in the modern world, I called it not so obvious establishment. And I've done, I grew up in India, Misty, as one of the lower caste people, right? The fact that I made it to the United States is quite 1 in a trillion. So I, as a child, starting at 4 years old, I was fascinated by revolutionary movements, left wing, right wing. So I studied everything I could get a hold of. But one of the things that emerges is the concept of the not so obvious establishment. They are an innovation of the establishment to manipulate people. So in 1984, I saw this as a 17-year-old kid, right, with Jesse Jackson, black guy, bullshitting people and corralling people. So I called out Bernie Sanders right away, Now Cornel West and the Green Party, oh my God, we're amazed that where the fuck were you? Are you fucking stupid? If you are a political theoretician, which you're not, and you were sucking these people for a long time, including Cornel West, right? They always think that the Democratic Socialists of America, the left people, the left wing was created to sucker people back in to the shoulder, the arms of the so-called establishment. Now, if you're Cornel West, you need to know that either you're really fucking stupid or you're acting like now you're a radical, And my argument is it's a former. He actually knew it. So, and he himself is a not so obvious establishment, right? Says a bunch of shit, but he's never been engaged in building a movement, you say? Because they are fundamentally afraid of everyday people and creating these self-organizing systems. And what I've come to the conclusion, Misty, is that the only way out of this is we have to educate people. And that education is not going to just occur, right? There used to be a theory in revolutionary politics, you oppress people enough, then they'll rise up. Well, it's been shown that's actually false. Oppression actually leads to greater oppression. This iPhone didn't just come into being. I didn't just miraculously create email. We have to use human effort, human organization, and we have to mobilize people with consciousness. So what I've done as a part of that is, my study as a scientist, as an engineer, has informed me that there is a fundamental science. You see, when you go back and look at the history of revolutionary movements, and you go look at the 1800s, be it Marx or classical liberals like Adam Smith, all those guys, or you go to Lenin, the fundamental things, these guys were using philosophical ideas of German philosophy. They didn't have engineering system science. It hadn't come into being, right? They didn't have the theoretical framework. That only comes into being in the late 1930s and with the work of Ilya Prigogine in 1950s, which informs us that there is a fundamental system science. And so my work as a scientist, as an engineer, separate in that world, and also as a political revolutionary and as a theoretician, led me to understand that there is a fundamental set of principles that interconnect engineering, system science, believe it or not, traditional medicine, and political theory. And that's what I've been able to tease out. That's probably separate from email and the other things I've created, probably my greatest contribution. And I say that with all humility. So I congealed all that into a program that I call Truth, Freedom, Health. And look, the elites understand system science. Brzezinski understands this, Kissinger understands this, and they use these principles of system science to manipulate people to the goal of power, profit, control. So if we're going to ever even have a chance of winning, we need to educate enough leaders who understand this physics. And I can, and you don't have to go to MIT. We have a woman who's an esthetician who, has educated a PhD at a University of Chicago, right? So I've been able to understand this science. I used to teach it at MIT, but put it into a framework that we can teach any person. And our goal is, when in 2020, when you go, if you want to go study that history, I was the first one to expose a pandemic. I said, the lockdowns are not going to help. I wrote to Trump, and he didn't do anything, right? I was able to call this out because I have a systems understanding, and anyone can have that prescience. But we live in a world right now without that systems understanding, which reveals, to your point, on the not so obvious establishment, that's called a disturbance. And the establishment has become very powerful in creating these people. In fact, they have a factory, I believe, Misty. So they find this, okay, they say, wait a minute, this brown guy is reaching 500 million people. So let's create another fake version of him. That's this freaking douchebag, Vivek the Snake. I mean, overnight he's created, right? A Brahmin boy, a Brahmin brown-nosing big pharma boy. Overnight they manufacture him, right? Overnight.
And a war hawk. He's a war hawk. He wants to go to war with China desperately.
Exactly.
He desperately wants to go to war with China.
Well,
as he's pretending he doesn't want to.
He's a fucking pussy. Okay, he has never had any life experience. He grew up. Grew up in a nice Brahmin family, and the Brahmins basically, have abused everyone else for centuries. Went to Yale, and and to get into Yale and be part of that clique, goes to a hedge fund. Literally, I don't know if you know this, Misty. The guy's such a douchebag. He starts a company from his hedge fund called Axovant. Right? Literally buys a failed drug, has his mother reanalyze the data, present it as some great drug against Alzheimer's, knowing it will never work, makes billions, sells his. I mean, this guy's a fucking scumbag. But if you notice, fucker Carlson never asked him. Even Glenn Greenwald has become a total, pussy. Has him on a show, doesn't even address that. So all of the neo-establishment cabal has built, right? All of these people, they all get paid on the back end with views and other kinds of things. So that's why I appreciate what you're doing. And the only way out of this is we need to educate people that you have the obvious establishment, the not so obvious establishment, and the larger political theory. So Thursdays are So that's
I 100% agree. Listen, I 100% agree with you on that, and I think that Greenwald has been making me angry with the Kennedy stuff. I think he was very soft on Kennedy. Greenwald, Glenn Greenwald. I think, I like Glenn. I think he's done really incredible work over the years. I just think that sometimes I don't know if he's not so obvious establishment or if he's just got a soft spot for Kennedy. Maybe. I think Jimmy Dore. I know that you just talked about Jimmy Dore last night. I want to talk to you about Jimmy Dore actually after the break. We have to take a quick break. But I think that's it is frustrating to watch, especially somebody like Glenn Greenwald, who I know is capable of pushing hard on these people, not do it. So that is incredibly frustrating. So. Hang tight. We're going to be right back, right on the other side of this break, right here on TNT Radio.
We found the solution to climate change, and it's so simple.
All right, everyone. I'm speaking to Misty from Australia, and we're really having a discussion, a broader discussion, from Australia to here, that why my presidency can have an impact for working people throughout the world. And one of the things that we're talking about is, and those of you listening, you should take time to go to truthfreedomhealth.com and recognize that, my run for presidency, the way you can help it is go to Shiva for President, get one of these bumper stickers and put it on the back of your windshield. 100,000 people will see it. In addition, take a little bit of time and download this flyer. Become an activist on the ground. And you notice what this flyer says. It says that the lesser of two evils is killing your children. And it'll really explain to you the fact that your child's lifespan, if you're in the United States, is going to be lower than yours. That pretty much says it all. We need a fundamental systems overhaul. And it is only that systems overhaul that's going to bring any change. And anything short of that is not going to really do anything significant for you or I. So let me go back to my interview here. Oh, okay. I think she's still doing her ad. So come back. So that's what I recommend to everyone. And also, everyone know that today, August 30th, 1982, is the anniversary of the invention of email. So there's the official copyright. You can see it. And if you guys want it, you can actually go to the store on our site. And you can actually get a copy of it if you want, and I'll send you a signed copy. So I want to recommend to everyone Okay, so here we go. We're back with Misty.
And we are having a conversation about his campaign for the presidency and just discussing, just before the break, we were discussing what he calls the not so obvious establishment. And we mentioned Glenn Greenwald. That's somebody who I've also been a little bit disappointed in. He has done great work over the years, and it's frustrating to watch him be a little bit soft on some of these people, in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure other people may have different opinions. But then you were just recently on with my friend Sabrina Salvati, and you were talking about Jimmy Dore. And there was, I just want to push back on something that you were saying against him, if you don't mind. You called him out for not having you on his show, which fair enough. I'm not going to speak to that because I can't speak for him, and it's his show. He can book whoever he wants. But what I do want to speak to is that you said you're an on-the-ground activist. I am myself. And you said that you, when you were going through all of the stuff in court and all of that, you didn't see Jimmy Dore in one instance supporting you. Now, as you know, I am myself an on-the-ground activist. I've been somebody who's hardcore involved in the fight against censorship, protecting free speech. And in no way am I saying that Jimmy's perfect or that he doesn't have his blind spots. But I can tell you that Jimmy Dore has been one of the most supportive people for myself and other people who are supporting free speech and press freedom. He has had numerous he's had myself and others like me on his show to hype our events. He always, anytime, as an Assange activist, I'm somebody who is very heavily engaged in the fight to free Julian Assange. And I know for absolute certain that when we have an event or a fundraiser or there's news on the Assange case, Jimmy Dore is one of the very few people in independent media who I can count on. I don't even have to ask him. I know he will talk about it. And not, like I said, not only is he given a platform to myself, but other on-the-ground activists who are fighting for various causes, not just mine, but various causes, whether it's healthcare or a whole host of issues. He's also contributed financially, generously, more than once. And so while I understand the frustration you may have in not being able to get on his show, and I don't, I can't speak for him.
Well, Misty, hold on one second. I'm not begging to be honest. Let me just talk about the facts, okay, with him.
Sure.
When I exposed Kennedy, he actually tweeted against it, okay? So let me give you my example. I've been through this fight 42 years, okay? A ground activist. I've seen it all. So what's really interesting is women like you, Sabrina, will interview me. What's fascinating is frankly, I consider them white liberal men. And I don't think they have any idea of the journey that I've been through. There may be some jealousy mixed in there, but I can tell you that when I exposed Kennedy, whatever experience you've had, that's your experience. Fine. But the bottom line is the historic lawsuit, our lawsuit exposed the entire backdoor portal in 2020. All right. Glenn fucking Greenwald, his mentor is Noam Chomsky, as you may know. Now, Chomsky knows me. All right. Many, many years ago, Noam knows me very well. And he said, write to Glenn. I have all the emails. He did fucking nothing. This is in the middle of the lawsuit that we got the first federal injunction in the history of the United States exposing the government and Twitter are working like this. Well, you're the big tech guy wanting to do this. Do you only come after the building is burned down and write books and do fucking movies about it? Shit is happening right then and there. You see, delayed truth is deadly. Fucker Carlson, the same thing. And you know what? All I know is people have said you should be on Jimmy Dore's show. I don't go to beg to anyone. But the bottom line is when I exposed Kennedy, he tweeted against it. All right? Kennedy's a fucking Zionist.
I'd have to see that.
I'll show it to you.
Listen,
So you know what? That's your experience.
And I don't listen. You're preaching to the choir on Kennedy. I despise him. I think he is a disgusting Zionist, and I think he is, as you said, the not so obvious establishment. Although he is a very obvious member of he's a Kennedy, for God's sake.
I know, but a lot of people.
I know.
That you have a little bit of a revolutionary consciousness, and that's fine. Jimmy Dore did that, but I can tell you. So many people have said, put Dr. Shiva on since 2020. All right. Now, I noticed that some of these people, I really believe, and I'm saying this with all humility. I've been around the block. It could just be, oh my God, if I put him on, am I going to lose all my views? All right. It's that kind of fucking jealousy. Women don't do it. So there's some fucking dynamic there, that I have to point out. And you haven't been in my skin, gone through the levels of struggle I've gone. So you've had your experience. And the two women he's put on, does he have something against a revolutionary Indian male who comes bottoms up that is not going to speak in his language? And that I can tell you when I tweeted against Kennedy, he hit me for that. All right. Praising Kennedy. So whatever the fuck it is, okay, so you're doing some shit. Great. But you know what? 2020 was the day of reckoning. March of 2020, to me, is a litmus test from who's a man, who's a warrior, who's a boy, period. Because March of 2020, we were out on the streets fighting Fauci. We did the Fire Fauci campaign. We're the ones who exposed the pandemic, and it's all out there. Kennedy was promoting fucking lockdowns. So
Yeah, he was.
if you have a
Yes, he was.
yeah, if you have a fellow comrade fighting there, winning the most important lawsuit, go to winbackfreedom.com. It's all out there. These people intentionally concealed it. Glenn fucking Greenwald intentionally concealed it. And I would even go for
with Jimmy actually bought into the COVID narrative initially. I mean, he got himself vaccinated twice. He's vaccine injured. So, and at that time, March 2020, that was pretty early on. He may not have even been ready for that kind of information. And, I think that I wish that he would have caught on earlier. I am glad that he did eventually catch on.
Why would you not listen? No, but I got to push back on you on this. Okay. Why would you not listen to a guy who's got all the fucking degrees at MIT? I'm considered one of the leading guys in the immune system. In 2019, I was invited to give the prestige talk at the National Science Foundation on the immune system. All right. So do I have to be a white guy with blue eyes with my last name Einstein or Feinstein? So I have to look at it that way. You see, because all of these guys are white dudes, white liberal dudes, frankly. So in 2020, man up. And now after 3 years of doing it, but I'm not begging any of these guys. Look, the point I'm at is, you know what the media is? The future is offline. This is the future. And all these guys are going to become irrelevant because they're not about building movements. Glenn Greenwald wants to win Pulitzer Prizes and that kind of shit. He wants to cozy up to Fucker Carlson. Fucker Carlson is part of the intelligence network. All right.
Yes.
He got all of it. So if you're fucking hanging around Glenn with Fucker Carlson, if you're fucking giving media attention to a fucking douchebag, brown nosing Brahmin called Vivek, and you don't have the decency to call an actual fighter, fuck you. So that's the way I feel about these people. All right. So
I can't speak to why Jimmy doesn't have you on.
I don't know. Fine. He probably
That's
put you on because it's fine. He's not going to get a guy who's actually been a warrior on the ground, okay? And that's what Sabrina should think about, okay? Maybe if she was a real revolutionary fighter, it'd be a little bit different. Oh, shit, right? I'm not saying that, but I'm saying my journey.
Okay, but to be fair, I have to, Dr. Shiva, listen, I'm an on-the-ground activist. I've been very heavily engaged in the fight against censorship, the fight for free speech. And that is not to, I'm not trying to big up myself here or to diminish the work that you've done. I just think that I don't think that you can say that it's because he's worried about having a fighter on his show. I think that he's had numerous fighters on his show.
Well, look.
I don't know why he hasn't had you on his show. I just think, and again, I didn't want to speak to the fact that he wasn't going to have you on his show. I'm just saying that as somebody who is an on-the-ground activist, I have very much experienced Jimmy Dore being incredibly supportive. And I'm not saying that that's everybody's experience. Like I said, I didn't even know who you were until 5 or 6 months ago. Maybe he is very much the same. I don't know. But I'm just saying that I think that
I don't think so,
that kind of anger at him, directed at him for not supporting you as an activist, I think is a little bit misguided because he has been very supportive of activists, of on-the-ground activists in numerous different ways on various different causes. That's all I was saying.
The most important lawsuit in the last century was the federal injunction. It's all out there exposing the entire censorship portal in black and white. In fact, the federal judge said this lawsuit is a Harvard Yale judge. He said this lawsuit will be taught in every law school class. There was 2,000 people on the Zoom call. Kennedy came to that call. Okay. So this lawsuit, and it was actually concealed by these guys and they had an opportunity. But the bottom line is, Misty, fuck all these guys. You see, what's happened is if you're with the swarm and you came with the swarm, you may do stuff after a certain point, you say, but the issue is delayed truth is deadly. So the big takeaway lesson is the actual movement is going to come from people who actually care for the suffering of people and who are one of us. And that's, so whatever drives him, great. But I can tell you, when people are on the ground fighting in the trenches, Greenwald, and particularly Greenwald and Fucker Carlson, okay, particularly Fucker Carlson, all right, who has a massive megaphone, concealed it. It's not like they forgot, they concealed it. And that's what we need to talk about, because you have Carlson, if you go look at his background, right, and you see what happened with Fox News, my work had exposed the fundamental issues with the election systems, which was signature verification and chain of custody. Trump used my stuff and made $250 million. I had a 2-hour meeting with him. I said, where did all this money go? Where did it go? So where
did it go?
Right. Now, Tucker Carlson was over at Fox News. texting, oh, there is no election fraud. And then when he saw the MAGA cult really taking this as an important thing, then he comes out and says, oh, yeah, there's election fraud.
Yeah.
And then he gets fired. And the reason he was fired and the reason the Dominion lawsuit was going to win against Fox, because it would have been defamation per se, malice, right? Because they have him saying there is no election fraud. And then after he gets fired, then he goes, hangs out with Alex Jones and tries to act as though he's a martyr. You see, that's how fucking clever these monkeys are. Right? They think they're going to use, the anger of the masses as though they're the victims to try to once again make themselves, on the one hand, making $20 million a year, on the other hand, acting like I'm a fighter for the masses. Bullshit. Exposing shit doesn't make you a hero. Did you expose it at the right time? Or are you like the fireman who comes after the building's burned down and says, oh, I'm here. I'm going to now be snarky and talk about this shit. So, you got to look
and
at...
Tucker just had Trump on, and it was the biggest softball interview I've ever seen in my life. It was embarrassing. Well, I was embarrassed for Tucker Carlson. That was horrific.
Look at the Glenn Greenwald interview with the snake Vivek. Softball. Yeah. It's like you have to wonder, how does a grifter network pay off these people? He's not a fucking, investigative journalist. These people don't do things when the shit is happening. They don't. Yeah. They wait. They watch, and then they package it, and they try to act like they're radicals. So no one should trust these people. We have to build a movement by the people, for the people, and it's going to be on the ground. But these movements are not going to win, Misty, without the right political theory. As a great revolutionary once said, there can be no revolution without the right revolutionary theory. And I can tell you that after 50 years, I've organized the physics on that, and we can teach people. They need to understand these principles. Because without that, you have a doofus like Cornel West saying, oh my God, Bernie Sanders and AOC, I didn't know they would support Biden. You could see that a mile away if you knew any theory, right? So that's the world we live in. We live in this recurrent process every 2 to 4 years. They find a bunch of scumbags, push them, have them mouth words of being radical. In fact, they use the word revolution or bottoms up, literally cribbing notes from our movement. But the important thing, I think that the cool thing to let you know is, we reached about 500 million people in 2020. We have about 500,000 people. We have a lot of people in Australia, by the way, all over the world. And what's fascinating to see now in 2023, in 2020 and 2021, a lot of people said, oh, Dr. Shiva, thank you very much. You helped me fight the mask mandate. You helped me fight the vaccine. And that was very opportunistic. That's fine. But in 2023, we're finding a whole host of amazing people who will see a video, Rogan, and Kennedy, having a love fest, and they'll say, wow, Kennedy's amazing. And then somehow, luckily, they'll come across a video of mine exposing Kennedy and Rogan. And in fact, we had a medical doctor like this, he said, I saw that video, and he goes, I had a cognitive dissonance for 2 days, but I had to agree everything you were saying was on the mark. And, and he's joined our movement. So we're finding people now who are much more self-reflective, much more honest, and willing not to give these people an inch anymore. So that's, we can't compromise with people who look the other way. Great, you did that, but you're not a fucking leader. Nice you're doing stuff, but I'm not going to look to you for leadership, because what did you do in 2020? If you were dumb enough to go get vaccines, I'm sorry, and now you've learned, but I'm not going to look to you for leadership, because you don't have the wherewithal to understand the nature of how these evil systems operate. And we need to educate.
And I agree with you on that. I mean, also that's just one issue. I mean, the COVID issue is a big issue.
That's just
obviously,
one issue.
It has many different tentacles, but it's also it's one issue of many. There's a whole host of issues, including anti-war, including free speech, anti-censorship, the Assange movement, all of that stuff. And so I think that it's important to. Not everybody's going to be perfect on every issue, and you're going to have to. And some people need to be kind of. Guided along a little bit, and that's frustrating and it's exhausting. But I think that it's much easier to do that if we're doing so, and trying not to alienate people or anything like that, and all of that stuff. So, so I agree with you on some of this stuff. I just think that, maybe. I don't know.
Wait a minute.
For me, I think it was just a little bit off-putting to see you, let's attacking Jimmy so hard.
I'm going to attack him.
When he is somebody who's been very helpful to activists on the ground.
That's your Misty. Listen, let me.
We're almost out of time. Just so you know,
we must separate the wheat from the chaff, especially at my level of leadership, where you're trying. We're not here to build fake fucking unity. Okay. Here's the bottom line. When you look at this graph right here, look at that graph. Okay.
I get it.
So every day that moves by, it can be, if you're living in Malibu and you've done well and whatever you're thinking and you have, that's fine, but you're not qualified to be a leader. And I will alienate these people, and I will make sure that they at least come apologize for what they didn't know. And they should learn some of these principles. But if they're not willing to, they're going to make the mistakes again and again and again. And, as someone who's been doing this since 4 years old, trying to figure this out, have some fucking respect for people who did put in the time. Because where we live now is a world where everyone thinks, well, I know everything. Well, you don't. Because you have to look at history.
Nobody
does. But you have to
Nobody
study,
knows everything.
But you have to study history, and there is a physics to this. And so what we're doing is educating people on this to be very critical, because we can't say, well, he's sort of a nice guy, let's accept him. And you do more and more of that, a movement gets blunted. It doesn't have that sharp edge, and you need that to grow it at this point. So
yeah, I get it.
You see what I'm saying?
I'm very critical of lots of people, including Jimmy. I've been very critical of Jimmy on certain things, especially when he was a little bit soft on Kennedy, in my opinion. I think that you can do that and also recognize, I wouldn't liken Jimmy Dore to a scumbag. That's all I'm saying. And that's what you did. And I just think that that's not exactly accurate. I do appreciate you taking the time. I'm sorry, we're out of time. I'm so sorry. We are out of time. I appreciate you coming on.
Yep.
And your website is, what is it? Viva, no, not Viva. What am I talking about? ShivaForPresident.com. That's the number 4. Everybody go check it out. You can find out more about the platform. You can donate, volunteer, all that good stuff. I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and talk to me. I'd love to have you back. And I'll be back tomorrow with another show for you. Dave DeCamp's going to be here. And actually, it's Dave DeCamp's birthday today. So we're going to have a little birthday party with Dave DeCamp tomorrow. As Julian Assange says, learn, challenge, act now. Don't go anywhere. Timothy Shea right after this on TNT Radio.
All right, everyone. This is Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. Look, we need to be hypercritical of all of these people, because all of them, go look back at 2020, and you will find all of these people are Johnny-come-latelys. That's fine. They came later, but you didn't come when the fucking fire was taking place. So it's very, very important to remember who will be our leaders, who called it at the right time, and who led and who followed. So yeah, Jimmy fucking Dore, still to this day, and I don't beg to be on his show. There's nothing about, Massa put me on your show. The bottom line is this: he still hasn't put me on a show. And he knows I'm the one who exposed the backdoor portal. We're the ones who called all these people. And many people have written to him. So she's had her experience, frankly, as a white girl who's been put on a white guy show. Great. But he's a white fucking liberal, and he's had a chance to put me on, and he hasn't at critical times. So that's my experience. I don't need to be fair with him. And if I'm alienating him, great. But the bottom line is this: it's not about Jimmy Dore. It's not about Fucker Carlson or Glenn Greenwald. It's about us. It's about us recognizing that we must choose our leaders wisely, who say the right thing at the right time. And that's what I did in 2020. And that's what we must do. We must build a fucking bottoms-up movement, and not all these people who are commentary people come after the fact. Right? So everyone should go recognize that our run for president, it's our run, Dr. Shiva for president. This is a way each one of you can get involved. You get that bumper sticker, put it on the back windshield of your car. And what's great about that is you reach 100,000 people. But I want to encourage people to volunteer and learn to get on the ground, because when you get this flyer and you get on the ground, right, you are now interacting with people. But more importantly, the messaging is very simple. Voting for Tweedledee and Tweedledum, left or right, the lesser of two evils is literally killing our children. And I keep pointing to that very simple graph. The U.S. life expectancy is going wackadoodle the other way, upside down, right? And that's what happens when we follow people who are either misleaders or followers who come Johnny-come-lately. And what I want to end with people letting everyone know is what we have done here with Truth Freedom Health is create a university, a community, so each one of you can become heroes. So you stop asking, oh, what about him? What about him? Are you going to be on his show? The issue is we're going to create our own movement bottoms up. If these guys want to put us on, great. If they don't, great. But the bottom line is we need to create a bottoms up movement, because our movement has an opportunity to affect and change the entire world, because it's for everyday working people. We have about 500 million people who know about us, about 500,000 people in 20 countries who've come to recognize that they need to become leaders. So what I want to do is I want to play a video, which is really sort of an anthem video on what Truth, Freedom, and Health is. So get involved, become a Truth, Freedom, Health Warrior Scholar, support, our presidential campaign. It's a historic one. Anyway, here you go. We have allowed our country to be taken over from within, and the end goal is you will have a homogenized world where we will become slaves, because there is a condition among the elites that really thinks they're better than you, deep down inside them, that you don't deserve the freedoms you have. They don't. This reality is what people need to wake up to, and we need to all unite working people. There's only one movement that can do that, and that is the movement that we started creating here in Massachusetts, the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health. Look, I've been a student of politics since I was a 4-year-old kid, studying revolutionary movements, left wing, right wing. There's a physics, there's a nuclear science to destroying the establishment. To build a bridge, you need to understand Newton's equation. You need to understand the laws of gravity. You need to understand Poisson's ratio. There is a way to build a revolution. And that's why I put this together. My goal is to train an army of truth, freedom, and health leaders. We don't need followers like social media. We need leaders, but they need training because the educational system does not teach them history, nothing. So in 3 hours, that's what I've started doing. That's the solution. We got to train people. First, with understanding what a system is, the dynamics of all systems that affect nature. The second is understanding the interconnection between truth, freedom, and health. Freedom is the ability to move freely, communicate freely, talk freely. Without freedom, you cannot convert ideas, hypothesis into truth, which is science. And without freedom, you can't really get to truth. And without truth, you make up fake problems and fake solutions, which means you destroy our health. And without health, which is the infrastructure of us and our body, you can't fight for freedom. Truth, freedom, health. Third concept is it has to be bottoms up. Working people, people who work uniting. And what the right wing has done is whenever you say working people unite, that must be communist. Meanwhile, they've let the Democrats run unions, which suppress workers, completely corrupt. But when you look at the arc of American history, it's been when working people came up. We need to go local. Every solution I'm coming up with as a part of this movement, we're giving the science, which is the truth, and then we tell people what they can do on the ground. Like with election fraud, you don't need to wait for some lawyer. Our goal is to train people to go local, to go local, to go local, fight locally. Forget lawyers, forget politicians, forget celebrities. You've got to learn politics, and there is a science to it. They lock us down, we should be ready to shut them down. And the fourth part of this principle is the not so obvious establishment. So when you look at a system, there's always something that disturbs you from getting to your goal. Well, the biggest disturbance is the not so obvious establishment, which are those people who claim they're for you, on the left and the right. The Al Sharptons who tell black people I'm for you. The Tucker Carlsons. Do you think any true anti-establishment person will ever be on Fox or CNN? I don't think so. They both mislead working people back into the establishment. Without this solid understanding of political physics and theory, you're screwed. You're going to follow on the left wing Bernie Sanders. Oh, he said something. Or Robert Kennedy. Scumbags. Or you're going to follow some right-wing talk show host. They're not going to lead us to liberation. It's us. We're building a bottoms-up movement, and that political physics, it's a nuclear science of change. Bottoms up. We have to organize to understand that there is people who talk a good game and then look at what they actually do, left and right. I'm sorry, Sean Hannity may say some good things, but I don't see the urgency in his voice to get something done, and it can only come when you weaponize yourself with the right knowledge. You need to be able to identify a rat. You know, Christ didn't go after the Romans, right? It was the Pharisees and the Sadducees who screwed him up. His own quote-unquote people. And that's where we're at. So these four concepts I've built into a curriculum where people can go to truthfreedomhealth.com, and it's an educational program. We need to train people in political theory. You need to have physics, and I've created that curriculum. People need to get educated. We need to get educated fast. And within a half an hour, I can teach people. 2 years of MIT control systems, I teach people those concepts. Then I apply it, anyone can understand it. And then you say, oh, I got to build a bottoms-up movement. They have to get politically astute, and then they have to go locally and act, not sit there on social media. They have to act locally, defy locally, do civil obedience locally, but with knowledge on how to build a movement. Now, the Senate campaign's expanded to the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health, and they can find it on truthfreedomhealth.com. So people can sign in, they can get access to a bunch of videos. If they want to take a course and become a Truth, Freedom, Health leader, I offer a full scholarship there. But we want people to make a commitment that they'll study, that they'll get certified, that they'll go do activities on the ground. So go to truthfreedomhealth.com. By the way, everyone, the reason Jimmy Dore is a scumbag is I have the actual tweet here, okay, where I'm exposing Kennedy. I'm actually exposing Kennedy. And this other shill for Kennedy called Chief Nerd, where I exposed Kennedy's video where he's saying, I'm fully pro-vaccine. I'm all pro-vaccine, right? And Chief Nerd says, oh, you left the end of the clip. I didn't, because you can see the whole clip. It's linked to it. And then Jimmy Dore says, oh, yeah, you left the end of the clip. You're pathetic. Well, the fucking bastard, there's 8. We have allowed our country to be taken over from within. That Jimmy Dore had to jump into that conversation to defend Kennedy says everything about him. All right. So I'm going to do a whole live on this, exposing this douchebag, Jimmy Dore, who was defending Kennedy right here. I have it. So fuck you, Jimmy. Thank you, everyone. Be well, be the light.